Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. And this video is to bring you a closer look at the National Guard products. Number 222. This is an automatic door bottom. This version features neoprene as an insert, and along in the DKB finish, the dark bronze finish. And let's remove it from the packaging and go over this automatic door bottom. The 222 is a very common piece of equipment, a very typical door bottom. You will see this in specifications. You will end up seeing this on job sites. Generally commercial. We see these we see these installed in hotels very often. Just pulling it out of the packaging here. Okay, and I'm going to remove the stretch wrap down here so we'll be able to operate it. I'll end up saying in this video that automatic door bottoms are a very elegant solution to sealing the bottom of the door. And there are certainly there's a handful of reasons why that's the case, why they're elegant. No other piece of equipment really does the type of job that an automatic door bottom does. Primarily what I mean by that is an automatic door bottom permits you to seal the bottom of the door, but when you have the door open, you're not dragging your seal across the floor. Okay? A typical door sweep is going to drag across the floor, would it not? A automatic door bottom is not going to behave that way, because every time that the door is open, that insert is tucked up nicely into the housing. And only when you that is proper operation, by the way, only when you close the door are you going to have that bottom drop to seal the door. Okay? Only when that happens. Very low closing force on this model. Doesn't take much to activate it at all, which is a very nice feature. Now the reason it's coming out like that is because there's no sill for it to seal against. But what in effect happens is when the door closes, this bolt is going to be pushed into its housing. And as we begin to push on the housing, it drops. Well, if my thumb were to represent the sill where it can only drop so far, it will then come out on the other end. Not quite that much. It will not come out like that when you have it installed. It will come out to this regard. Okay, I'm using my far thumb down here, to restrict the unit. And what I'm driving at is it will continue to seal the surface. And the reason it comes down that far is because this model, one of its hallmarks, is a 1-inch drop. So what happens is when the door closes, this bolt or plunger makes contact with the stop of the frame, the soffit of the frame. Well, that has nowhere to go but in. The bottom drops like this, and then the rest of it knifes down, and that's how it seals. And that's by design. I've had people call and say, hey, this doesn't work right. It doesn't seal evenly. There are models that drop evenly, but those are for sliding doors. A swinging door doesn't operate that way, nor would you want it to operate that way. The reason is when the door is open, okay, that plunger is fully projecting from the end of the housing. That's connected to a flat spring, and when we push that in, it makes that flat spring push the rest of the unit down and out. Okay? But it has to drop on the hinge side first. Why is that? Doors open, 90 degrees, 0 degrees. 90 degrees into its closing cycle, and that button, plunger, bolt is going to start to make contact when the door is getting relatively close to the final last degrees of the closing cycle. Well, over here at the hinge side, your door is basically closed, isn't it? But over here at the lock side, you're still quite ajar, several inches. If this were to drop evenly, you would be dragging this area out here. You'd be dragging all of it, in fact. The closer that you got to the closed position, the more of that seal is going to be dragging. So the door certainly swings this way, but the action is more like this, if you think of it this way. So when that door closes, you want this sealing and it dropping evenly across so that when the door gets closed, that's when the final drop is going to occur on the opposite side here. Okay, that's by design. Now the trouble you'll have, the only trouble you'll have with an automatic door bottom is if your sill is not level in such a way that there is less of an undercut on the strike side than there is on the hinge side. If it's smaller on the hinge side than it is on the strike side, it's not going to be a huge problem if it's within reason, because it will drop and then continue to drop even past 0 degree, should you need it to. The problem with that is you'll have heavy compression over here, because as soon as you start to open the door, you want that spring being relaxed to draw the drop bar back up into the housing so that it gets tucked up and put away. So if your sill's not level, it might not be a big problem as long as you've got a smaller gap on the hinge side. But if you've got a much bigger gap on the strike side or the lock side, you'll have so little set on your drop bolt that by the time you are fully sealed, you might not be fully sealed on the hinge side. This is an extreme example, however it does happen. But in all normal instances where you have a normal, basically level floor, automatic door bottoms are extremely elegant because of the aforementioned reasons. What also makes these really cool is you can have the front door of your home or the mudroom or, you know, a commercial application, a school for that matter. And as you open the door, well, if it's a residential application, if you open that front door, there's probably a rug behind the door, right? Okay. Well, the rug's got a certain thickness. The floor to the bottom of the door, there's a certain dimension. And it would be nice for the door to be able to open up and over your rug. Well, not if you've got a door sweep installed. That's just going to drag across the whole situation. But in an environment where you have floor, threshold, door, automatic door bottom on the outside, and as the door starts to open into your house and that drop bar is being tucked back up into the housing, the point is that we'll clear the rug. So it's a piece of smart technology, even though this was very likely invented around World War II. That's my best educated guess as to when automatic door bottoms were invented. The nice thing about the 222 is that its maximum drop is 1 inch. That's on the higher side of maximum drop that will be encountered when it comes to automatic door bottoms. 3/4 pretty typical. If you get into sound transmission control units, you're going to see a 1/2 inch. We've got a manufacturer that can do 1.5 inches. So depending on the circumstances that you're contending with, when you make a decision about an automatic door bottom, you have a few initial questions. Probably the first is, what's my drop that I need to cover? Now, in that prior example where you had that horribly uneven floor, you could probably take this and maybe not install it exactly level. You might cheat it one way or another to help compensate. You might want to run the automatic door bottom as close to parallel to the floor as you can, so that you are able to seal it evenly. If it's incredibly out of level, there's, you know, it's not a problem that hardware can solve. It's a flooring problem. And people will use automatic door bottoms because of those reasons. They're automatic, they work every time, they're incredibly long lasting because there's no scraping or dragging of the insert across the surface. This is a sponge neoprene that's here. This is going to make this material exceptionally good at not only being just a typical weather seal, but also it's going to be good at sealing for acoustical properties. sponge neoprene, open cell neoprene will be good for deadening, the transmission of sound, as well as the typical sort of elements that you'll have. The other question you'll have is what kind of drop do you need to cover, is what application do you want to look at in terms of an automatic door bottom, meaning how are you going to install it onto the door? Will it be surface mounted? Will it be semi-mortised? Will it be mortised under the bottom of the door? So there are those different characteristics of options in terms of how you'll install it that need to be addressed as well. We'll get to that when we talk about the product catalog. There's an image down below that shows the dimensional properties of the item. It's basically 2 3/32 or almost 2 1/8 inch overall height. The thickness is 11/16. Looks closer. Yeah, it's close. It's close. The length, this client happened to order a 36-inch length, and we'll talk about how to size these as well. There is information down below this video. Automatic door bottom with a neoprene insert. The length you will specify at the time of order. That's what your neoprene insert looks like. This is in the dark bronze anodized finish. That's the DKB. So the 222 is this. The N is the neoprene. The DKB is this. If you drop the DKB off, you would indeed have a just a typical aluminum finish. And on the 222, it would be an NA would be the color, and that will give you a clear anodized aluminum finish. The neoprene will be black, and this is surface mounted, which we'll talk about that in a moment. This is smoke and draft control listed, UL10B and ULC listed for up to 3 hour, air infiltration tested, ANSI and BHMA certified. You can very easily see in specifications that automatic door bottoms are to be certified by ANSI and BHMA. Used with a threshold for maximum sealing capability. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a 3/4 inch undercut under the door, you're probably going to want to put a threshold there to have that seal up against, rather than expecting the seal 3/4 inch of it worth hanging out to cover everything that you're doing. You want this to be making contact with a threshold. So they have a note there that nylon brush would be a preferred insert when it comes to carpeting applications. If you are covering something over carpet, which you could, you want nylon brush because that will pierce into the carpeting rather than this is not firm by any means, but this would not give you a very good surface area coverage like neoprene would. Specify the exact length required when you are ordering it, and we'll be happy to provide it that way. Door bottoms over 3 foot and over can be trimmed down in the field up to 4 inch. Anything below 36 inch, they say can't be trimmed in the field. You can trim them, but the manufacturer's published guidelines is you can't trim it in the field. With automatic door bottoms, you want to order it the size that you need, and we'll get into that right here in a second. Lead lined available for radiation shielding is available, so they can do lead lining on this if you've got a hospital or a clinic, some application where there is an x-ray machine in play. The hardware can be manufactured so as to give you that seal that you need. Now, talking about the size that you need, the net size, that's going to be completely dependent on what drop do I have to cover, what is my mount type, surface, full surface, semi-mortise, or mortise. This is a surface mount, so that means it gets applied to the surface of the door. Automatic door bottoms are always installed on the push side of the door. There are variants that can be installed on the pull side. It's not part of this video, and I don't know that National Guard offers that solution, but a tenet of automatic door bottoms is that they're mounted, when they're surface mounted, they're mounted on the push side. That can be the outside of your door, that can be the inside of the door. I don't know, it depends on whether the door swings in or out. But in most instances, the door will swing in, and you'll be mounting that on the exterior, which is, of course, where you would want your line of defense, outside rather than inside. Okay, so we'll talk in a moment about the net size to order the material to when we get to the next part of the video, but I want to draw your attention first to You'll notice this end of the automatic door bottom. It has this funny bolt sticking out. You'll notice the other end. It does not have a funny bolt sticking out. This end is always the hinge side. That's rule 1. Rule 2, you never cut the hinge size. What are the 2 rules of Fight Club? This is the side that is always the lock side, and you will always trim from this side if you need to. This has the bolt in it that will make that bottom begin to drop, so you would never want to modify this side. This is also threaded and connected to that bolt, that flat spring I talked about earlier. As I turn that clockwise, you can see I've drawn it in quite a bit. As I turn it counterclockwise, I'm going to draw it out. The amount that you turn it in or out is directly related to the amount of projection. The amount of projection is directly related to the amount of drop. The further that this has to travel in to get to where it has to be, the more the seal is going to drop. Be mindful when you install this, draw that bolt in, basically. Let it stick out 1/8 of an inch. Test your door. Well, you're going to have to turn it out a little bit, but continue to set that so that you get to just a seal. There is the last thing you want to do is use a very understandable logic. Oh, I want to have a lot more pressure on that. Let me turn that bolt out so it pushes it in a lot more, so I get a lot more seal on the bottom. That's actually the worst thing that you can do. Only a seal, and here's why. When that bolt is pushed all the way in, you can see that it will drop a substantial amount. Okay? As you begin to open the door, you'll relax the tension on that drop bolt, and it will begin to project again. As soon as it begins to project again, it should start lifting, not relieving undue strain on that flat spring. What I'm trying to say is, as soon as you go to push that door open, you want that drop bar to start coming up. For the same reason it doesn't drop evenly, it needs to come up unevenly as well. And an undue amount of pressure on the flat spring will not only bring the unit to a premature end of life, but it could destroy the unit. This client ordered this unit and said we installed it and it worked fine for a day. The client called and said the owner had manipulated the bolt, and they arrived to the job and everything was out of the housing. The entire drop bar had come out, the spring had come out, and wondered if it could be repaired. So the answer is no, they can't really be repaired. The factory, is not going to entertain having it come back. It would be less expensive to buy a new one. But why did the unit fail? Well, it failed because the client had said, well, I wanted a tighter seal. No, the seal was tight. It was contact. They brought that bolt out as far as they can go, and as soon as they opened that door, it was dragging across, and that drop bar got totally kicked over and ripped right out of the housing. That's what happened. So again, just contact only. Now let's get into how we go about specifying the size for this unit, and that will take a little bit of look at the product brochure and installation instruction as well. Let's move on to the next step of this video. Okay, now on the page where you're likely looking at this from, we're going to have the product brochure and the installation instructions. Let's tackle the product brochure first. This will show us our 222 right in here. This is the model we're looking at. Okay, we're going to need to pull something else up here as well while we're doing that. This will show you some typical surface-mounted models. Okay, we're in the 222 column here. We've got the open neoprene, the sponge neoprene. We've got silicone that can be done, and we've got nylon brush that can be done, and that's how the part number changes. The hallmarks of each: good for sound attenuation, good for general overall sealing, the neoprene will be. The silicone will be exceptional when it comes to extreme temperatures. Okay, if you have an environment like the roof of a power plant in the southeast of the United States in August, silicone would be a good option for that. maybe the American Southwest. Back to those nylon brush, the brush will look like this, and that's great for piercing into carpeting as best as possible. You'll take note of the minimum length and the maximum length is available. It's not unheard of to have doors that are 5 foot wide. The southern half of California, those homes love wide doors. They're problematic to seal, but they will accommodate up to 5 foot length. Use with that threshold for maximum sealing capability. We discussed the nylon brush. Specify the exact size to avoid field sizing. We're about to hit that as well. Automatic door bottoms 36 inch and longer. We discussed that you can't cut them down when they're smaller than 36. These are your maximums. End caps are available, and they are included with this 222. We're going to go over that in a moment. End caps, in my experience, are not available. They should say included. When you are doing a 222, this is a handed product. With this model, it doesn't matter if you put this side on the face of the door or this side on the face of the door. You can just flip it over. Whatever side the drop bolt needs to go to, it's not a problem. But you can tell with this model, with that tapered front, you need to order that as a handed unit. Okay? So be mindful of that, as well as the 310. This can't just be simply flipped over. Now, they can be reversed in the field, and there are installation instructions that will show that, but that would be a last resort. You don't want to trim it unless you need to or want to. You don't want to reverse it unless for some reason you want to. There are other models that are here as well. And let's jump to the manufacturer's page. Here, I clicked here. It opened up the manufacturer's page to their product catalog. And I'd like to look at the other models so that we can start to talk about what they're supposed to look like. So we've got surface-mounted models that are here. Okay, and that's generally where a catalog is going to start, with surface-mounted models. Standard and heavy duty. This would be certainly, this is considered standard duty by National Guard, but it's some people's heavy duty material. They make even larger ones. Now, what I like about the larger ones is only the additional surface area and generally an additional feature. Take note that on the inside of your housing, as the bar comes down, you technically have this void that's here. Well, the higher end models or heavier duty models, they'll serve to try to discourage the transmission around because of that inserted pile. I like to order these handed as well because I would personally want the pile as close to the outside as possible. No, actually, I want this on the face of the door. I want this on the side of the door as much as possible. You got your neoprene. This is a hollow tube neoprene as well. This, the bristle will give you a nice application, but that pendant that's hanging there, that's a piece of aluminum. Some people call that a security bar that will give the drop bar notice of when to stop dropping, because the distance from the bottom here to the bottom of the bristles is the amount of projection that you would want in a carpet application. Sliding door models. These are the ones that are going to drop evenly because you would need to have that. These are mortised models. They get mortised into the channel in the bottom of a door. This is a model intended for a hollow metal door where you have an inverted bottom channel. If you have a hollow metal door with an inverted bottom channel, your options are this or a surface mount. Then they have heavier duty versions on all of these as well. They have the model that they have an alternative model that has the triggers on either side, and these provide a very low compression force required to push the door closed. The heavier duty models will inherently have heavier springs, and I don't really notice that it takes more to close the door, but they are more of an animal to contend with because everything's larger. Now, this image here allows you to talk about the first two models. Are you going to surface mount it, or are you going to semi-mortise mount it? Okay, where you're going to take this same door and you're just going to mortise this out to put this flush. If you're installing it half mortised or semi-mortised, we need to know that because the end caps will be different for those, or there may not be end caps available for this sort of model. But as we're about to illustrate, and when you get into the mortise style, the type of mount that you're going to get into is going to directly relate to what you're going to do in terms of ordering it. So let's go over a typical application. We have a frame. Let's just say for ease of comparison, we have a hollow metal frame, typical 5/8 projection stops, 2-inch face, blah, 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 all regular stuff. Okay. Your door is going to sit here. You've got your hinge. Okay? Obviously swinging this way. Your automatic door bottom mounts on the push side when it's surface mounted. That means it's going to reside within this space here. Okay? If this is a 3.0, that's the nominal size. That means that it's a 3-foot door. That means from the inside of the frame, that's going to be 3.0 or 36-inch. That means your net door size is definitely not going to be 36. It's certainly going to be 35. It's probably going to be 3/4, maybe 13/16, whatever the case is. It could be 35 and 9/16 if you're using a continuous hinge. The truth of the matter is none of that matters when you're ordering a surface mounted unit. The only thing that matters is what's the distance between here and here. That's all you care about. Now, in this example, if you've got a 3.0 hollow metal frame, the projection of this is going to be 5/8. It could be different, but 5/8 is standard. Okay, so that means 5/8. So 36, minus 5/8 minus 5/8 is going to be the distance between here. So that's going to be 34 3/4. The rule of thumb with this is you deduct 1/8 of an inch for the unit itself. So your order size is going to be 34 5/8. Okay, 34 5/8. It doesn't matter what door size you're doing. Okay, so just be mindful that you just care about this. If you want to order 36-inch pieces and go through the trouble of cutting them, you're welcome to. The truth is the factory is manufacturing these from pieces anyway. Why not just have them make it the size you really need? And 1/8 of an inch margin, a 1/16 on either side, right in this area, would be considered best practice. Now, if you were to install this in a half or semi-mortise mount, okay, you're now going to install it in here. Now you don't care about the distance between the stops at all. You care about how big is the door. Okay, it's unlikely it's going to be 36-inch, although it could be. So at this point now, you're really going to measure how thick your door is, and in fact, you're probably going to measure the push side of the door, because if your door, and this is an exaggeration, if your door is beveled, the distance on the push side of the door will be different than the distance on the pull side of the door. So if your unit is 11/16 thick, which I think it is, you're really going to be more concerned of what is my size of my door right in this area. How wide is my door from here to about here? Okay. Now, suffice it to say, if you were going to do a mortise style, you've got your door, you're going to create your mortise in the door like this to fit your door bottom into it. You now definitely care about what's the size of the door. Okay. The majority of door bottoms that we sell are just 36 or 48 or 42, and I say to myself, order it the size you need. The factory truly doesn't care what size they're making it to. So the product catalog below shows the other surface mounts, but a trip to the full product catalog, the product brochure will show the surface mount. A trip to the full product catalog will show you all of the options. Okay. Now, on to the installation instructions. These are included with your paperwork as well. If nylon brush gasket, okay, we're not doing nylon brush. For single doors, this is where we talked about earlier, 1/8 of an inch shorter than the distance between the stops on the frame. For pairs, cut it a 1/16 of an inch shorter. Okay, you want a little bit of overlap between the two doors. For pairs, cut 1/16 of an inch shorter than distance between the stop on the frame and meeting edge of door. So you're going to measure from the frame to the edge of the door, less a 1/16. Do not cut from the end with the adjusting rod. We certainly talked about that. Do not cut until the drop bar is extended in the down position. And what that means is when the unit drops, you've got your drop bar here, and the logic would be is that it drops straight down. It really doesn't. It kind of drops like this. Not so exaggerated, but at a very small angle. So when you are going to trim the unit, you're going to want to have the drop bar extended down, and then you'll cut so that you achieve a flush condition on the side when you're extended down, because when this retracts, it will actually retract back up this a little bit. Okay. We've discussed the cutting. The reason the nylon brush has to be thought about is because the nylon brush, this little gray area here and here, this is aluminum, this is brush, that's steel. What you don't want to do is put your beautiful, 80 tooth, 8-inch, brand new, $90 saw blade through that. So pull the brush out, cut that with aviation snips or end cutters, and then continue. Slide it back in. With the door closed, position on push side of the door with adjusting rod toward the hinged side. Align bottom case flush with the bottom of the door and the 1/16 of an inch clearance at each end. Mark the holes. So at this point, you've pulled the door off the hinges. Maybe you know what? You probably haven't. For a surface mount, I don't see why you would. Position it accordingly. Mark your holes. Pre-drill your holes. 9/64 of an inch bit. Install with the screws provided. Don't over-tighten. If you over-tighten it, what happens in the situation of over-tightening it is, like anything else, it's just not going to work right. Here's the end view of your unit. Okay, when you run that screw through there and you tighten it down, what you really end up kind of doing is crushing it like this. And then that drop bar doesn't have the freedom to move up and down as it normally would. So don't over tighten the screws. If it comes down but then doesn't retract really well, check how tight your screws are, would be my guess. Set the adjusting rod for proper seal. Draw that, turn that bolt in, let it stick out 1/8 of an inch, and then turn it counterclockwise to set your adjustment accordingly. Maximum drop 1 inch. Once the hinge end of drop bar makes solid contact, the other end will drop. We discussed that. On wooden frames, install the strike plate on the door where adjusting rod makes contact. I'll go over that right now, as a matter of fact. Let's go over the screw package that's here. Now the screw package is here, and it is going to allow you to get this installed. Okay, good. Okay, I was checking that it had what I expected to see, which I'll reveal in a moment. A lot of people make automatic door bottoms. National Guard makes a good one. The name National Guard is synonymous with weather stripping, so you will bump into that name and their specifications if you are in commercial carpentry. This is going to be the end plate for your hinge side. It's got 2 holes in it so that you can install it as a non-handed unit. Surface mounted, you get the concept of what that's going to look like. You're going to obviously have to trim your neoprene ever so slightly after you get proper installation. But this is also showing why you need that 1/16 of an inch. This is going to reside within the space between the face of the door and the face of your stop, so no problem there. So you get one end cap with these 2 holes. You'll get one blank end cap. And these holes are for the screws, which will be included, these tiny little screws that are there. Okay. You're going to get the 3 fasteners for attaching the unit to the door. They are literally going to go through this hole. Okay, you get that concept. That's easy. You will get that strike plate that they mentioned. It's nothing other than a small piece of aluminum. If you have a wood frame, you will use this and you will install it. Onto the wood frame. Okay. There's one of the screws that are slightly larger. You'll use it because every time this makes contact with the stop on the frame, if it's wood, you don't want it to gouge into your frame, which it certainly will over time. So you'll apply that strike to your frame so it makes contact with this small swatch of aluminum. If you don't want to install that, you could also, you'd probably want a screw a little bit larger than this, but get yourself a flathead screw, very short, drill countersink, and put that screw flush with the stop so that this just makes contact with the head of the screw. Okay. Now there are 2 small nails. That's what I was checking earlier. If you're going to trim this in the field, you're going to very carefully tug this down, and you see that hole that just popped out? Insert your nail into that hole, and it will go through the unit, and it will hold it projected, and sure enough, there's another one right there. That is the condition into which you're going to cut this unit with it fully projected. Okay. And that's how you go about doing this. That's your screw package as well. Your installation method will obviously be different if you are working on a full mortise mount. You're obviously going to have to unhang the door to mortise the bottom of the door. If you're going to mortise anything, and you can install this in that semi-mortise or half mortise, but now you can see why the end caps have to be different. These would not work. Be mindful to not attempt any preparation on a fire-rated door at all. If it's 20 minute, 45, 60, 90 minute, it would not be permissible for you to, in the field, modify the door by routing it, mortising it. Drilling it for locks you can do so long as the hole for the cylinder doesn't exceed a specific relatively small. 3/4 inch is the largest hole you can drill, with the exception of a cylinder, which they don't define the diameter of the cylinder because cylinders can be 3/4 peanut cylinders, standard mortise cylinders, 1 in 5/32. They could be a mogul cylinder that's 2-inch diameter. It could be a master ring or a jumbo cylinder that would be 1.5 inch diameter. So they don't really define that. They'll let you drill a hole for a cylinder, but you're not going to be able to route the face of that door. You would unintentionally destroy the integrity of the fire door. So if you are dealing with a fire-rated door, you'll certainly also be needing to look into ordering those doors from the factory accordingly. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page that I had shown you earlier, where you can pull up not only all of the National Guard products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I'm partial to National Guard for 3 reasons. Good quality product, very good quality people, prompt, reliable, predictable shipping lead times, a company that will bend over backwards to attempt to accommodate. National Guard, like most companies that we deal with, are manufacturers. They make to order, but they are very eager to earn your business, and they will do everything that they can. One note about the dark bronze is there are lots of different dark bronzes in the world. I know that the case of my caliper is black. Okay, National Guard is for sure toward. This is not black, but you have to look at it under a certain light to reflect a lot of light to see that you can really tell there's a little bit of dark bronze that comes in. If you are matching a very, very dark bronze, National Guard would be a great choice. I've supplied people weather stripping from other manufacturers who were either moderate or light in terms of their dark bronze, and they've said, this stuff doesn't match. I need a dark bronze, aluminum storefront, dark bronze. National Guard works really well with. So be mindful as well that National Guard's dark bronze is, in my perspective, the darkest of dark bronzes available when it comes to weather stripping. If you have any questions on the 222 in an N insert in a DKB finish or any other National Guard product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.